The rain pattered against the windows of the conference room as I sat at the far end of the table, my portfolio clutched tightly in my hands. Everyone else had their materials spread out confidently, printouts, tablets, coffee mugs claiming territory. I was 32, had been at Morgan & Pierce Architecture for 3 years, and despite my experience and education, I was still treated like the new kid. "Let's hear from the senior team first," said Richard, our department head, barely glancing in my direction. I watched as my male colleagues, most with less experience but more assertive personalities, presented their concepts for the Westlake Community Center project. Each time I tried to contribute, I was met with polite nods before the conversation shifted back to the main players. "My name is Alexandra Chen. Alex to my friends, Ms. Chen to my subordinates, if I had any." Despite my master's degree from Cornell and 7 years in the field, I remained perpetually junior at this firm. Not officially, of course. My business card read Project Architect, but the invisible hierarchies were clear as day. "Alex, anything to add?" Richard finally asked, 40 minutes into the hour-long meeting. I straightened up. "Actually, yes. I've been researching sustainable building materials that could significantly reduce costs while meeting the environmental requirements for—" "That's great, Alex. Maybe you can email that research to Jason? He's taking point on sustainability." Richard smiled thinly. "Now, for the competition submission deadline next month, I think we should put forward Jason's concept with Mark's interior layouts. Thoughts?" The knot in my stomach tightened. I had spent weekends developing my concept for this project, drawing inspiration from the community's history as a former industrial neighborhood transformed through grassroots initiatives. My design incorporated elements from those original factories while creating modern, versatile spaces for today's community needs. Later that afternoon, my friend Nora from accounting found me staring blankly at my computer screen. "Let me guess, another meeting where the boys' club prevailed?" she asked, perching on the edge of my desk. "Is it that obvious?" I sighed, pushing away from my desk. "I don't get it, Nora. I've been doing everything right. I arrive early, stay late, volunteer for challenging projects, bring innovative ideas. But somehow I'm always overlooked when it comes to leading anything significant." Nora's expression darkened. "It's not just you, Alex. Remember Diane from legal? 3 law degrees and 15 years of experience. But they brought in some guy from outside rather than promoting her to head counsel." I nodded, remembering the office politics all too well. "But what can I do? Keep my head down and hope someone eventually notices my work? Or," Nora said, lowering her voice, "you could find another way to get your designs seen." She glanced toward Richard's office. "The Westlake submission is anonymous, right? Just numbered entries for blind judging?" I frowned. "Yes, but Richard's already decided whose work we're submitting." Nora raised an eyebrow. "Has he, though? The deadline's not for another month. Things change." That night, I couldn't sleep. Nora's words kept echoing in my mind. The competition was prestigious, sponsored by the city and judged by a panel of respected architects and community leaders. Winning would mean recognition, advancement, and most importantly, the chance to see my vision become reality. By morning, I had made my decision. I would continue working on my design, refining it in the evenings and on weekends. If the firm wouldn't submit my work, perhaps I could find another way. The following weeks were a blur of activity. By day, I contributed to Jason and Mark's project as directed, offering suggestions that were sometimes acknowledged, sometimes ignored. By night, I transformed my dining room into a studio, refining my design for the community center. My concept centered around a building that served as both a gathering place and a testament to the neighborhood's resilience. I incorporated reclaimed materials from the area's industrial past, designed flexible spaces that could adapt to different community needs, and created a central atrium inspired by the old factory skylights that once illuminated workspaces. "You know this is crazy, right?" said my roommate Ellie, bringing me coffee one Saturday morning as I hunched over my drawings. "If they find out—" "They won't," I replied, not looking up. "The submission process is anonymous. Each entry has only a number identifier until after the judging." Ellie sighed. "And what happens if you win?" You think Richard won't notice it's your design being built in his backyard? I finally looked up. Then I'll have proven that my work deserves to be taken seriously. Besides, I'm not even sure I'll win. The competition is fierce. But as the deadline approached, my confidence grew. I had created something special. A design that not only met the technical requirements, but truly captured the spirit of the community. I visited Westlake several times, talking with residents about what they wanted from their community center. An elderly man showed me photos of the old button factory where he'd worked for 30 years. A young mother told me about the lack of safe spaces for children to play after school. Each conversation shaped my design in subtle ways. 3 days before the deadline, I finalized my submission package. The project guidelines required anonymous entries, submitted online with only a registration number as identification. I had registered independently, separate from the firm, using my personal email. That same day, Richard called a meeting to review the firm's official submission. Jason presented the final concept, a sleek, modern building that looked like it could have been placed in any city in America. It was technically proficient, but lacked soul. Still, everyone nodded approvingly. "Excellent work, team," Richard said, clapping Jason on the shoulder. "This is exactly the kind of forward-thinking design that wins competitions." I said nothing, but inside, a small flame of defiance burned brighter. That night, I submitted my design. As I clicked send, a mix of emotions washed over me: fear, excitement, pride, and doubt. Had I just made the biggest mistake of my career? Or its defining moment? The waiting began. For the next 3 weeks, I threw myself into my regular work, trying not to think about the competition. The firm buzzed with confidence about our chances of winning with Jason's design. I smiled and nodded when colleagues discussed it, fighting the urge to defend my own vision. Then came the email. I was working late, finalizing some details on another project, when my personal phone pinged. The subject line made my heart stop. Westlake Community Center Design Competition. Results. With trembling fingers, I opened the message. "Dear participant, we are pleased to inform you that your submission, entry number 4872, has been selected as the winning design for the Westlake Community Center project." I couldn't read further. My vision blurred with tears. I had won. My design, not the firm's official submission, had been chosen. A mixture of vindication and panic swept through me. What had I done? And what would I do now? The next morning, the office was in chaos. Richard had called an emergency meeting after receiving notification that Morgan & Pierce's official entry had not won the competition. No one knew yet who had. "This is unprecedented," Richard fumed, pacing at the front of the conference room. "We've won this competition 3 years running. I want to know what happened." I sat quietly, my face carefully neutral, while my heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. "The announcement of the winner will be made at the city's press conference tomorrow," Richard continued. "I expect everyone to attend. We need to show good sportsmanship, even in defeat." Throughout the day, speculation ran wild about which firm had claimed the prize. The larger firms were the favorites in the rumor mill, Foster & Associates, or perhaps Yamasaki Partners. By evening, I could no longer contain my anxiety. I called Nora. "I won," I blurted out as soon as she answered. A moment of silence, then, "Holy shit, Alex. You actually did it. Now what?" My voice cracked. "Tomorrow they're announcing the winner, and everyone will know it was me. I'll be fired." "Maybe," Nora admitted. "Or maybe not. This could be your moment to finally be recognized. Or to be blacklisted from every architecture firm in the city." "Look," Nora said firmly, "you submitted your own work to a fair competition, and it won based on merit. Yes, there will be fallout, but you have nothing to be ashamed of. Your design was the best. Period." I spent a sleepless night weighing my options. I could claim illness and skip the announcement. I could quit before they could fire me. Or I could face the music and stand by my work. The next morning, I chose the third option. I dressed in my most professional outfit, a charcoal pantsuit with a crisp white blouse, applied my makeup carefully, and headed to City Hall. The presentation room was packed with representatives from competing firms, city officials, and local press. I spotted Richard and our team near the front, all wearing identical expressions of forced politeness. I slipped into a seat toward the back, my hands cold and clammy. Mayor Winters approached the podium, thanking everyone for their participation, before launching into a speech about the importance of the community center project. Finally, she reached the moment of truth. The winning design, she announced, represents everything we hope to achieve with this project. It honors our industrial past while creating a vibrant space for our future. It is both beautiful and functional, ambitious and practical. I am pleased to announce that the winning entry was submitted by... She paused, checking her notes. Alexandra Chen. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Richard's head snapped around, scanning the room until his eyes locked with mine. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to rage in the span of seconds. The mayor continued, unaware of the drama unfolding. Ms. Chen, would you please come forward to say a few words? On legs that felt like they might give way at any moment, I made my way to the podium. As I passed my colleagues, their expressions ranged from bewilderment to betrayal. Only Jason looked at me with something approaching respect. At the podium, I took a deep breath and faced the crowd. Thank you, Mayor Winters. I am deeply honored that my design was selected. The Westlake community has a rich history and a bright future, and I wanted to create a space that honored both. This center will belong to the people, so I spent time listening to what they wanted and needed. The result is a design that I believe truly reflects the spirit of Westlake. I spoke for a few more minutes about specific features of the design, my voice growing stronger as I discussed the work I was so passionate about. When I finished, there was enthusiastic applause from the city officials and community members present. My colleagues remained stone-faced. As I stepped away from the podium, Richard intercepted me. My office, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., he hissed, before forcing a smile for the reporters approaching us. The rest of the event passed in a blur of congratulations and questions. I fielded inquiries from reporters, accepted praise from community representatives, and avoided my coworkers as much as possible. By the time I escaped to the privacy of my car, I was emotionally exhausted but also exhilarated. My design would be built. Whatever happened next, I had that victory. I arrived at the office at 7:45 the next morning, prepared for the worst. Richard was already there, his office lights on. I knocked on his door, straightened my shoulders, and entered. "Sit down, Alex," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. I did so, bracing myself. "What you did was unprofessional, underhanded, and completely contrary to company policy," he began. "You used company resources and information to compete against your own employer. I used my own time and my own resources," I countered. "And I did it because my ideas were being consistently overlooked here." Richard's face flushed. "You were part of a team. Your contributions were valued." "Were they? When was the last time I led a project? When was the last time my design concepts were even considered for submission? I've been here 3 years, Richard, and I'm still treated like an intern." "That's not true." "It is true," I interrupted, surprising both of us with my boldness. "And we both know why. It's not about my skills or experience. It's about fitting into a certain mold, being part of a certain club. A club I can never join." Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "So, your solution was to go behind the firm's back. My solution was to let my work speak for itself, through a blind competition where it would be judged solely on merit." I met his gaze steadily. "And it won." A long silence stretched between us. Finally, Richard sighed. "The board wants you terminated, of course." My stomach dropped, but I nodded. I had expected this. "However," he continued, "terminating the architect who just won the city's most prestigious competition would be problematic from a PR perspective. Not to mention, we'd lose the contract." I frowned, confused. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Richard said slowly, "that Morgan and Pierce will be retaining your services. The firm will oversee the Westlake project, with you as lead architect." I stared at him, speechless. Don't misunderstand me, he added quickly. What you did was wrong. But the results are what they are. Your design won. The city wants you as the architect. So we adapt. I found my voice. And after this project? Richard's expression hardened slightly. That depends on how well you handle this opportunity. Prove that you can lead a project of this magnitude successfully, and there will be others. As I left Richard's office, I felt strangely hollow. I had won, but not in the way I had hoped. There was no admission that I had been undervalued, no recognition of the systemic issues that had driven me to such desperate measures, just a grudging accommodation to save face. Over the next few days, the atmosphere at the office was tense. Some colleagues avoided me entirely. Others, particularly the junior staff, regarded me with a new respect. Jason approached me at the coffee machine on the third day. "Bold move," he said simply. "Your design was better than ours, deserved to win." I nodded, surprised by his candor. "Thanks. For what it's worth," he added, "I've pushed for your ideas before. In meetings you weren't invited to." Before I could respond, he walked away, leaving me with yet another piece of the complex puzzle that was office politics. The following weeks tested my resolve in ways I hadn't anticipated. The transition from being overlooked to leading a high-profile project was jarring. I was assigned a team of 5 architects, including 2 senior colleagues who had previously outranked me. Robert, one of those seniors, made his resentment clear from our first meeting. "Just so we're clear," he said, his voice laced with thinly veiled contempt. "I've been at this firm for 12 years. I've overseen projects 3 times this size. Then I'll value your experience," I replied evenly. "But this is my design, and I'll be making the final decisions." Each day brought new challenges. Budget constraints threatened key elements of my design. City regulations required modifications to my original vision. The community board had its own set of demands. Through it all, I had to navigate not only the technical aspects of the project, but also the delicate politics of leading people who didn't want to be led by me. There were nights I came home so exhausted I could barely speak, collapsing on my couch with takeout containers in doubt. Had I made a mistake? Was I really qualified to lead this project? Ellie would find me there, staring blankly at architectural journals or project specifications. "You belong here, Alex," she'd say, handing me a glass of wine. "They just don't know it yet." 3 months into the project, we hit a major roadblock. The environmental assessment revealed contamination in the soil from the site's industrial past, a complication that threatened to derail the entire timeline. The firm's leadership called an emergency meeting. "This could add millions to the budget," Richard pointed out grimly, "not to mention months of delays." All eyes turned to me, waiting for me to falter. Instead, I stood and walked to the whiteboard. "We can turn this challenge into an opportunity," I said, sketching rapidly. "If we incorporate a bioremediation system into the landscape design, we not only solve the contamination problem, but create an educational feature about environmental restoration." I outlined my proposal, drawing on research I'd done for my master's thesis years ago. When I finished, the room was silent. "That's actually brilliant," Robert admitted reluctantly. Richard nodded slowly. "Draft a detailed proposal by tomorrow. If it checks out, we'll present it to the city." The city not only approved my solution, but celebrated it as an innovative approach to urban redevelopment. Local environmental groups praised the project as a model for future developments. The press coverage was extensive, bringing positive attention to both the project and the firm. 6 months later, the groundbreaking ceremony for the Westlake Community Center took place on a bright spring morning. I stood proudly with the mayor, community leaders, and yes, Richard and other firm executives, as we ceremonially turned the first shovels of earth. "We're gathered here today not just to break ground on a building," Mayor Winters told the crowd, "but to celebrate a vision that will transform this neighborhood for generations to come." As she spoke, I gazed across the expanse of dirt that would soon become my design made real. The preliminary work had already begun: site clearing, utility preparations. the first tentative markings of where walls would rise and windows would frame views of the surrounding community. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me, her expression earnest. She introduced herself as Tanya, an architecture student at the local university. "I read about your design in Architectural Digest," she said, her eyes bright with admiration. "The way you integrated the community's industrial history while creating a forward-looking space, it's exactly the kind of architecture I want to create." I smiled, remembering my own idealism in school. "It wasn't an easy road." "That's actually why I wanted to speak with you," she said. "Everyone knows about the competition and how you went against your firm to submit your design. You've become something of a legend among the female students." I laughed, surprised. "A legend? I doubt that." "It's true," she insisted. "You showed that sometimes you have to take risks to have your voice heard. That matters." Her words stayed with me long after we parted. Had my act of defiance meant something beyond my own career? I hadn't considered the possibility that my story might inspire others facing similar barriers. The construction phase brought its own set of challenges. Unexpected structural issues with the existing foundation required quick problem-solving. Supply chain delays threatened our timeline. Through each crisis, I found myself growing more confident in my leadership, more certain of my abilities. What surprised me most was the gradual shift in how I was perceived at the firm. The success of the Westlake project began to open doors that had previously been closed to me. I was invited to client meetings, included in strategic planning sessions, consulted on other projects. 1 year after the groundbreaking, the Westlake Community Center was nearing completion. The central atrium, with its soaring glass ceiling inspired by the old factory skylights, was already being hailed as an architectural triumph. The reclaimed brick and timber from demolished industrial buildings had been transformed into warm, inviting spaces that honored the neighborhood's past. During a site visit with Richard, we stood in that atrium as late afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass, casting geometric patterns across the polished concrete floor. "You've done exceptional work here, Alex," he said, his voice carrying a note of genuine respect I'd never heard before. "The board is impressed." "Thank you," I replied simply. He hesitated, then added, "I owe you an apology. I should have recognized your talent sooner." I turned to him, surprised. "Is this where you tell me you've learned your lesson about overlooking women architects?" A faint smile crossed his face. "Let's say the firm is evolving. We're implementing new protocols for project assignments to ensure they're based on merit and experience, not other factors." "That's a start," I acknowledged. "And," he continued, "we'd like you to head up our new community development division. Your approach to the Westlake project has attracted attention from other cities looking to revitalize their urban spaces." My journey to this moment had been far from ideal. I had taken a risk that could have ended my career. Instead, it had forced open a door that had been firmly closed to me. Since winning the competition, I had been given leadership of 2 additional projects. More importantly, I had been included in meetings and decisions where I had previously been excluded. Change was happening, slowly but surely. Not just for me, but for others who came after me. Mira, a talented young architect who had joined the firm recently, was already being given opportunities that had taken me years to access. When I saw her presenting her concepts in a department meeting, with the senior team actually listening, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The grand opening of the Westlake Community Center took place 18 months after that fateful competition submission. The building stood as a testament not only to good design, but to persistence and courage. Children raced through the light-filled corridors. Community groups gathered in the flexible meeting spaces. Elderly residents reminisced about the old factory while admiring how elements of it had been preserved in the new construction. As we posed for photos at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Mayor Winters leaned over to me. "You know, Alexandra, your building will stand here for generations. Long after all the politics and drama are forgotten, your vision will remain." I smiled, looking out over the bustling activity in the center I had created. She was right. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the battles fought in conference rooms or the silent struggles for recognition, but the work itself. My work. Finally seen, finally valued, finally brought to life. That evening, I hosted a small celebration at my apartment for the friends who had supported me through the journey. Nora, Ellie, and a few others who had believed in me when I doubted myself. To Alexandra Chen, Nora toasted, raising her glass, who refused to be invisible. And to what comes next, added Ellie. What came next was still unfolding, a career path that had been permanently altered by one bold decision. There would be more projects, more challenges, undoubtedly more barriers to break through. The industry wouldn't change overnight. But something fundamental had shifted, both in how others saw me and in how I saw myself. The concrete and steel of the Westlake Community Center would tell my story far better than words ever could. They would say, "Here stood a woman who refused to be overlooked. Here stood an architect who believed in her vision. Here stood someone who, when told she was too junior to lead, found a way to prove them wrong." And perhaps most importantly, they would say to every young woman who walked through those doors with dreams of her own, "Your vision matters. Your voice deserves to be heard. And sometimes the only way forward is to create your own path."